Welcome to the Erskin Music Show. We are here on the Thursday edition of the Erskin Music Show. And like I said yesterday, I was not very prepared for some of the technological issues that we had yesterday. I do apologize for the audience for those little faux pas yesterday. Was not able to get the audio working on one of the videos there. That I had a pre-recorded video there, and so I think we figured out how to solve that. So we'll be hearing from Christina at some point a little bit later. You check the comment here, make sure that we are ready to go for the day. But it is the Erskin Music Show, as I said, the Thursday edition. And let me position myself so I can look directly into the camera. I want to make sure that you guys see my eyes today. I just want to make sure you see my passion today. You guys see what the topics are today as you're looking over that today. And you can decide whether or not, it's a free country. You can decide whether or not you want to tune in to this show or if you want to do something else. I do always appreciate the fact that you guys enjoy this show, and that when you guys join in, it makes me feel like there's actually something being accomplished in this world. There's a lot to talk about. You guys see the topics today, and we're going to be diving into those. Yesterday, I was not well prepared to go into any of those because, quite honestly, it was a rough morning for me, and I'll just share a little bit more about that as we get started. But before we get started and do all that, we need to have some verses of the day. The verses of the day come from the book of Matthew, the gospel according to. I think we have to break this up into two. But let's do this. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, and then we'll get the rest of 34 here in just a second. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient is the day for its own trouble. So that is our focus verse of scripture this morning. We begin each day with a verse of scripture just to kind of center our hearts. Like I said before, on the Thursday edition, the Monday edition, and the Thursday edition, that's when I'm balling out and I'm just doing my own thing, representing all the thoughts and comments. I'm apologizing for nothing. Where are my sound effects at? Man, oh, here we go. I'm going to need that one today because I'm going to apologize for nothing that I'm about to say, and I'm going to say a lot of stuff. So if, once again, if you're sensitive and you don't really like to be challenged, this will not be the episode that you'll want to be joining in. Dolphin agrees. We got Big Head in the back. How you doing today, Big Head? You good? Big Head is good today. We got Ruby and Scooby there in the back. How you guys hanging? You like that? So good morning to some folks that are out there. Love seeing you guys' names. Love seeing you guys on the ticker that I have here. And so let me just fly this in, those of you who are joining today from the Facebook audience as well as the YouTube audience. You guys be aware of this, that we have places where you can go and see things, and places where you can be a part of what's going on here. So let's take that off of there so you guys can see that. All right, let me get my handy dandy apology things because I'm going to apologize for nothing that I'm going to say. I'm owning all of the comments and all of the statements that I'm making today, and I'm not apologizing for anything. Let's get ourselves prepared and let's get ourselves ready for that.
I apologize for nothing.
Okay, I'm going to need that today. But just saying good morning to a couple of people. Ed, Neil, Melinda. It's good seeing you guys this morning. Good to see some eyeballs. You're watching me as I'm watching you. So that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. And you're watching me as I'm watching you, and God is watching all of us. And so let's do this in a good way today. Let's keep our hearts steady and keep our hearts trained on the Lord. Let's seek first the kingdom of God. And that's the reason why I do this. And that's the reason why I don't want no record label telling me what to do, because I'm going to say what the Lord tells me to say, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Yesterday was a tough day for me. Whew. I woke up to some tweets that I received from Jackie Hill Perry. I follow her on Twitter, and she was talking about what kind of evil do you have to be on a man's throat when he's saying, I can't breathe, and then you just keep your knee on this man's throat until you kill him. And I'm thinking, that she must be talking about the gentleman up in New York that happened a long time ago. I'm kind of confused about this story. I can't breathe, and that moniker has been out for a while, and so I was really confused. I was like, man, I hope people are not bringing up old news and trying to combine it with this Amy Cooper story. And as I started to learn more about it, I was like, oh no, this is a new story. So I unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how you would spell this out, but I went to the news story itself from the Minnesota affiliates that were there covering the story, and I watched the actual video, and just to say beyond horrified in what it was that I saw. And okay, so I've probably been a little desensitized. I've watched death movies before and seen war movies and everything, and I've grown up. I'm an adult now. I've seen maybe way too many hours of that. And so that part was just absolutely heartbreaking, beyond heartbreaking to me. But the part that just absolutely crushed me was when the 9-year-old girl was talking about, yeah, I was going by and he kept saying he couldn't breathe. And then the police officer wouldn't stop until he killed him. And so I don't know what the journalistic integrity of that situation was, but I'm not sure why they had to interview a 9-year-old girl. But she was there as an eyewitness to a police officer who was killing a man who they have obviously neutralized and detained. And he's in the street, black man who was crying out and saying, I cannot breathe. And at one point, I even heard on the video, he said, "You going to get in the car?" And he's like, "Yes, I'll get in the car." That didn't make any difference at that point. Um, and so that absolutely crushed me. I probably spent 20 minutes yesterday just crying. I was scheduled to do and ended up finally doing the show for John Reisner yesterday, the Street Talk edition. And I messaged him after that and I was like, hey, bro, I can't do your show. I'm sorry, but I'm not in a good frame. My mindset is not thinking about how to respond appropriately, properly in these things. And at this point, it's probably about 7 o'clock in the morning. My show is at 10, his show is at 11:15. And I mean, I just was an absolute wreck. And then I had this tension within me. As like I told him before that we were going to come on, and even before all this started, we were going to talk about Amy Cooper. That story basically meant virtually little to me because I figured that what was going to happen was that was going to get really blown out of proportion. I watched that video as well. She was overly dramatic, and I do agree with every sentiment that is there. If she calls the cops and tells the cops in a dramatic fashion that there's a black man who is coming after me and he's threatening me in the way that she did it, it could have very well cost that man his life. And so I'm not minimizing that story, but I'm just saying that was not a story that I really wanted to spend much time talking about. But I had agreed to go on the show and we were going to talk about racism in America. There's only one race. The Bible tells us that we're all come from Adam and Eve. We've bunged this thing up with evolution and all these other nonsensical things that we've created divisions within our culture. I would even probably to some extent lay the hands of responsibility on the Census Bureau. Why are we taking a census and asking people what race they are? We come from one race. That's from Adam and from Eve. Um, so I was going to go do that show, and I was just absolutely unable to do the show yesterday morning. And I prayed about it, spent some time with the Lord. You guys know at 10 o'clock yesterday, I was still not really all in that good frame of mind. I was hoping that the show would just be Christina Ward's interview. I couldn't get that to work yesterday, and so I had to actually talk myself. That had to be the worst show in the history of shows yesterday because I had absolutely nothing coherent that I could say. I was unprepared, and I told you I'm coming back on Thursday with some time to be in the Lord, with the Lord, calibrate, get some things right, and then I'm going to do a show, and we're going to talk about George Floyd today. And so that's what a difference a day can make. I'm actually prepared today and want to talk about what happened with George Floyd. So again,
I apologize for nothing.
let me get started on this issue. There's several different angles. One is that it's heartbreaking that these kind of things are happening in America still, but I think there's enough people who are starting to understand that these kind of things are not isolated. This is not an incident that just happens in Minnesota. Happens, you start ticking down through the names, and I've got one of my artist friends, actually Kim Lanier, who's been on this show before, who's actually writing a song in honor of all the different names of people who have been wrongly or unjustifiably murdered, killed, intimidated as a result. And she was saying as she was finishing up the song, she had to add more names to it because of what has happened with George Floyd. You go back to Trayvon Martin. I had a list of names. In fact, I mentioned them yesterday and just started ticking down through the names of people who would be in a song like that. And there's many, many names that would be on that list. This is my prayer journal. I'm just going back through it, just kind of working my way down through. But George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Ahmaud Arbery, Michael Brown in the Ferguson situation, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And that is the culture and the society that we live in. There are some people that don't like to talk about that because they don't like to believe that we as Americans in 2020, with all the technology that we have and all the things that we can do, and man, everything is so beautiful and it's so clean over here, and the economy is just booming. People are dying. People are committing atrocious murders in the street in Minnesota. People are committing atrocious murders by the droves daily at abortion clinics all around our country. And nobody wants to talk about that. And nobody wants to act like those kind of things happen in America. But they happen all the stinking time in America. And black people have been saying, and this is the meme that really got me. This is another angle that's on all this. If you're a white American that's out there, and there's a lot of white Americans who watch this show and they're a part of Erskin Music life, world, and worldview, let's say this. There's a picture of Colin Kaepernick who has his knee on the field during the national anthem. And there's a picture of this police officer, and I'll just say this is my own assessment of his look on his face, looking very smug, who's got his knee on a man's neck who he's killing. Which knee bothered you the most? Now, I'm going to go on record and tell you that I would not have put my knee on the field and demonstrated the same way that Colin Kaepernick did, because I'm not in his position. Maybe there's another way to do things. Maybe there wasn't another way to do things. He certainly did get everybody's attention to get us talking about this debate. But which one bothered you more? And for some people, they might actually say that guy, Colin Kaepernick, scourge of the earth that he was, yada, 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 all the different things that we heard. And I'm going to have to keep this PG because I know there's some kids and families who watch this. That guy kneeling his knee on the ground during the national anthem, he needs to get his blankety blank up, and he needs to, and I heard all sorts of things about Colin Kaepernick. Now, although I didn't agree with what he did, and I would have done it, but done it a different way, and tried to achieve a different outcome, he did what he did. And so I'm cool with that. He's got, my grandfather just passed away, as many of you guys know. He was a veteran, and he said, I don't necessarily agree with the way that he's doing it, but I went to Vietnam and I fought and almost got killed so that I could protect the right of him to do that. And so I know that was some of the veterans' perspective on what he was doing. And so that we the president, everybody just absolutely just went insane and nuts on that. Where's the outcry from the president and all those people who were upset about that knee? Where's the outcry? Where's the disdain, the disgust, the absolute level of horrific comments that are being made in responses to something when it happens like this? You see, America, we have a problem, and it's a gospel problem. We have a problem because we have not, and here's the third knee, we have not bowed our knee to Jesus Christ. So I'm going to look directly into the camera for those of you who are watching me and say to America, to say to Americans, we need to bow our knee. There needs to be a third knee involved in this, and it needs to be every knee bowing to King Jesus. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is the Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That's going to happen. But this third knee that is represented in the picture, if I show Colin Kaepernick, if I show this police officer, smug looking face like he was, and I show our knee, we need to fill in the blank with our own self, bowing the knee to King Jesus. Or this will just keep happening over and over and over and over. And I don't know why at this point people are surprised. I mean, there should be a sense of moral indignation about what has happened, but there shouldn't be a sense of surprise and shock. I can guarantee you that I know of virtually no black people in America who are sitting back and saying, you know what? I didn't know there was racism in America. I didn't know things like this could happen in America. I honestly had this conversation with my wife this morning, and I said, shade happens in a lot of different ways. And I know there's some comments that are out there. It's people commenting on things. That's great. Great. I see all that. I see you guys out there. I'll be with you in just a second. But there's some shade obviously thrown at the police officer who killed this guy. Okay, we don't know his name, but his day in court is going to come. I believe in due process. I'm not changing my perspective on that. He's fired, and he will need to be tried in a court of law. And that's going to be appropriate at the appropriate time. Everybody's going to be paying attention to that. However, there's also some shade and some responsibility, and I believe justice that needs to be levied against these police officers who are in cooperation with this man who are just kind of standing around. They're just kind of watching. I don't know if they're checking their emails. I don't know what they Apple Watch. I don't know what they are doing in the picture, but I have never been in a situation before, I can honestly say, where I've had a cohort that is going awry and me not say something about it, or me not try to intervene in the situation to say, hey, he's detained, he's on the floor. Maybe he spit at you. Maybe he called your mom an unmentionable, unspeakable word. And my heart goes out to police officers. You have a very difficult job. People see when you put people in the paddy wagon. They see when you take them off to jail. They see when you handcuff them. They obviously see when you rough people up and brutalize them in the streets. But you guys have to endure a lot of punishment. Those of you who worked with me, and some of you guys are on this show right now, recognize that I worked in behavior intervention before I worked with special needs. And in part of that process, I had to restrain kids and I had to do a lot of different things. I took a ton of abuse, language, things that were done to me, things that were thrown at me, names that I was called in order to do the job that I was required to do. And so you intensify that infinitely in the job of a police officer with lethal force. So my heart goes out to police officers. I know that your job is tough. I'm not minimizing that at all. Maybe George Floyd said some things about your mother and where your mother came from and about your dad, or anything that was just so completely inappropriate that you were absolutely upset and you wanted to sucker punch him. Maybe he did. I'm not saying that he did, but maybe he said something that was bad. Maybe he didn't say, I'm not getting in that car. I wrote a check. It was a bad check. It bounced. I don't know what he said or what he did. He's not going to be able to speak for himself because he did. But what he did in reference to what your response was did not match. And for police officers who are also in that vicinity to be standing around watching this happen, allowing this to happen, there's obviously some shade and some culpability on your part as well. That's another angle. Third angle, and this is one that I heard of, and this I'll give you your point here in just a second. What about the people who are standing around videotaping this? Now, I'm absolving the 9-year-old girl who was interviewed, and I don't even know if you should have interviewed a 9-year-old girl who just saw somebody get killed on the news, but you're a journalist and you've got to live with your journalistic integrity. But there were people who were standing around who were filming this. There's no hiding what happened there. The cameras are rolling. People are watching this. And they're saying something to the police officer. I said, Kelly, that's my wife's name. For those of you who don't know, Kelly, there's a situation in which I could literally get myself killed. I'm looking at the screen. Because I
apologize for nothing.
There's a scenario where I'm not sure what would happen. I'm very serious about this. I'm looking at the screen. I've had a day to contemplate this, and I had a conversation with my wife. And I don't know how I would respond in a situation. If I'm driving down the street, if I'm coming out of that store and then there's an altercation that ensues and then the police come and, I'm watching this and then my phone comes out and there's other people who are standing around and they're telling the police officer, like, hey, the dude can't breathe. Like, he's got a few moments left in his life and you are choking the life out of him. He's restrained. You've not done anything. I think, I'm not sure about this, but there's something inside of me that knows that this response is possible, that I would have, with my MMA training, would have jumped with a flying knee and hit this police officer in his face to knock him off to save this man's life. Kelly said, you'd get killed. You would go to jail. And I would say, I know, I think you're right. But I don't know that I can stand around and watch somebody. I have never been the type of person that stands around and watches people get mistreated. I definitely would have been saying something. I definitely would have tried to create some kind of diversion or something that was going on there, and that could have cost me my life. There could have been 2 guys that were killed in Minnesota. One guy, George Floyd, and then some no-name guy that is a music artist, apparently from Nashville. And you guys would have been coming on the show. Some of you guys would have been coming on the show, and you would have been saying, yeah, we remember Erskin. Yeah, he was always, and there would have been a segment of population that would have been like, we don't know who Erskin is. We've never heard of this guy before, but obviously he had to have bad character because he shouldn't have been involved in this. And he was obstructing justice that was being taking place there. And so he was at fault for what it was that he was doing. And that's one storyline. But it makes a big difference if you actually know the person who is involved in what's going on there. If I get killed as a result of what it is that I'm doing, I'm fairly articulate. I think I could have maybe said something to the police officer, distract him, or get him out of that situation. Or I don't know. I actually honestly don't know what I would have done in that situation, but I cannot rule out the possibility that I would have intervened in some type of physical way that may have caused me harm, that would have been a distraction that may have saved this man's life. I can't rule that out. Let me give you some thoughts here. And it's silly. People telling me that I might die, but think about my wife. You know what? People do some things in this world that try to save other people's lives, but let me just put this up here. This is the George Floyd thing, and this is what it is that I want to say. Here's 4 words for this topic, and then I'm going to transition. This happens too much. This happens too much. I believe the report came out in 2017. That's 3 years old. But of every 10,000 people, there's 99 to 96 black people in America who will be killed by police officers. All those are different circumstances. There's no 2 circumstances exactly the same. But if you compare that to every 10,000 people of white young men, there's 39 who were killed. It's disproportionate when you look at the number of the population. It is almost an all-out assault on young black men in our culture. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, one of the problems that plagues the African-American community is homes where fathers are not primary in their spiritual influence. Did you hear what I just said? Homes where fathers are not primary in their spiritual influence. That is just a devastating problem. But that problem has been exacerbated when the young men who should be at home are incarcerated in prison or are being killed in the street and are not able to raise their kids. And that's a very real problem that is expressed and faced in America. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
I apologize for nothing.
This is the Erskin Music Show. I should give you some music here real quick before I fire off these next 2 comments. What are we looking at? 10:29 right now. Let me just do it. Let me do this. Let me just give you. I got to keep rolling. I got another call today because I got a children's song that's coming out, and you guys are going to love that. But let me just do this topic real quick. Police brutality. We're already on this one, and so let me just put this one up here. More authority, more accountability. And I'll just say this to the police officer who killed this man: your day in court is coming. It's going to be hopefully swift justice that takes place here on the account of this family and on the account of the community, Minnesota, America, everybody who believes in absolutes of right and wrong. And we'll get into that in just a second. And so that is part of the responsibility. I've already talked about the other officers who are culpable in this situation because they stood around and they did nothing. Maybe they put the handcuffs on this man, they detained him, but they did not intervene in a life-saving way once the situation was neutralized. If you're a police officer, you want to get on here and tell me that this is policy and procedure, I mean, you're welcome to do that. I know many police officers who have said that this is not policy and procedure. I cannot possibly see how it would be. But there's a lot of comments that are being made about culpability of other police officers. And I just boil it down to this. I want to teach my son about the use of force, the use of power, and the use of authority. Every son, I think, grows up and wants to be great. They want to have power. They want to have prestige. My son is no different. He has, a stack of basketball cards and also football cards. He loves those. He loves looking at the players and then just being able to watch when we allow him on the NFL network, their training, their workout, their regimen. He dreams about those kind of things. And I remember as a young boy dreaming about those kind of things as well. And, having authority. And, he made a statement to me that was interesting the other day because he was talking about, he's watching my training. I train every day. I go out and get it done and everything. And, that's just to stay in shape. It's not vanity or anything. I'm required to do a lot, and I need a lot of energy to be able to do what it is that I do. I go from 5 o'clock in the morning until sometimes 12 o'clock at night. And so some of that is physicality. And I'm okay with that. But my son, he looked at me and he said, you ever try to get in the NBA? And I was like, no, after I finished playing college basketball, I had invitation to go to, some of the customary camps that seniors get a chance to go to try out for teams, but I didn't want to go and do all that. I wanted to go to seminary. I wanted to start my theological education and get that degree so I could go out and I could have a lifetime of ministry and focus on those kind of things. He's like, oh, that's okay. Did you ever try, do this? What if you played, because in his mind it's still kind of nebulous. If he asked me, could you beat LeBron James in basketball? I'm honestly going to tell him I've not ever played LeBron James in basketball, but if LeBron James played me, it depends on if I got the ball first and I hit all of my shots. And so that's a very real possibility for me. Sometimes I get hot from 3 point. So anyway, it's just Jess. I'm pretty sure that LeBron James could beat me, but I'm not certain. But in his mind, he's not sure. Like LeBron James, my dad, he's still kind of in that world. He's like, Dad, have you ever tried to be great? He's like, I just want to do something that's great because I want to make the Anna Batarte name great. And to hear him make that statement was a little bit, kind of, it's like, you be a good man. That's what makes greatness. Be a follower of Jesus who loves your wife and loves your family and does some of the things that I'm trying to exemplify. That's what makes greatness, not all these things that you see on television. But young people are prone to those kind of arguments and those kind of conversations. But I'll just simply say this, to him who is looking at authority and when people have power, the use of that power and the abuse of that power, hopefully in this scenario, we're able to see how justice, and this is a term that comes up, the church wants to run away from it so often. Pastors don't want to talk about it so often. But justice, man, it's amazing how silent many white evangelical pastors were. Some of them are my friends. I would invite them to come on this show and talk about police brutality and what they saw. I would invite them to come on this show because they have a lot of words to say. I hear them on Twitter all the time. I see them on Twitter. Man, I hear their commentary. Like, whoa, they got words to say. Social justice. Oh, man, they are fired up. I didn't hear a peep. I didn't hear a word from many white pastors who are out there. Pastoring your church, man, you're doing a great job. Not talking about what's going on in this world. And so when the abuse of power is seen by all, and there's no retributive justice, even in its local iteration, which is the confine of the sphere of government, being able to bear the sword and punish evil as it is required, given the responsibility of government. When there's no retributive justice that takes place in that sphere, then people grow up saying, so you mean if I get power, I can abuse that power? Or people who have power are not now accountable for the use of that power? No, I want to make this statement in relationship to police officers, and I want my son to look. We actually have been talking about him going into the military. That's an honorable service, son. You can serve the Lord in the military because there's many people in the military who don't know the Lord, and you do. I want to encourage my son to be a police officer. Yes, a police officer. An honorable, noble, courageous, fearless, justice, righteous, loving police officer. Because obviously the world needs some. Obviously the world has not in this situation seen what they need to see in our people of authority. And I'm not taking anything away from police officers. Your job is tough. But more authority means more accountability.
I apologize for nothing.
All right, let's make some homeschoolers mad here. Let's make the homeschoolers name mad. All right, my wife said you better be careful. You better be careful. We homeschool people. And my wife says, it is just, I don't like it when you tell homeschoolers and homeschool families that homeschooling is weird. Homeschoolers are weird. We're working on that word around our house, but I just want to go ahead and say it. For those of you who love cats, I do not like cats. If you like cats and your thing is cats, hey, this is not your show because I do not like cats. And so I'll go down swinging on cats because I'm not going to try to run them over or anything in my car. I see them and they're just like, that's a nonsensical animal. God knew what he was doing. I'm not going to say he did anything wrong, but that is a useless thing. All right, anyway, enough about cats. You got me distracted. Big head, you got to keep me on track. I'm talking about homeschoolers. And often you guys know when it comes to homeschooling, I'm the first person, I was not homeschooled myself. When I met homeschoolers in college, I thought that was the weirdest. Who in the world are these anti-socialized people that I keep seeing show up at church? They look like they're from 20 years back. They have no social skills. They seem to be wildly out of step with everything that's going on in the flow of culture, and I do not understand why you would homeschool your kids. What are these people? What are these people going to end up doing in this world? Was a question that I often ask myself. And so I am always joking, and I will say joking, about homeschoolers and homeschooling, because I feel like homeschoolers can get a little bit arrogant sometimes. And part of this is just to check our own ego. I'm a homeschooling dad, homeschooling mom. We homeschool our kids. And sometimes that can be the most arrogant world of just know-it-all people who I am constantly annoyed by, the know-it-all people who are homeschooling their kids. That's great. I'm glad you know everything in the world and you can teach your kids everything in the world and you're just absolutely super and superb, but you don't have to broadcast that to everybody so we all know how smart you are. Man, I can be on homeschoolers all day long. There's just so many monikers and there's so many. This is almost like the Babylon Bee. There's like a little sliver of truth in it, and the reason why it's funny is because it's true. The antisocial part of it is my kids sometimes have a hard time talking to people. They're having a hard time relating to people. Sometimes homeschoolers are not the first people to jump out and be socially engaging. Some of those things have a shred of truth to them, and so they can be a little bit funny. But here's the reason why I talk about it, and I told Kelly this, and she agreed completely with me, is that homeschooling and homeschoolers, there's really no debate about it. We both believe not everybody should homeschool. Not everybody should homeschool. But we say that as a referendum against those parents who cannot homeschool. It is a negative thing that you couldn't homeschool because most of the people who are haters of homeschool, they say, I could never be around my kid that much. You're looking at my face. I got silent for just a second because, like I told you before, I worked in behavior intervention in a school district. Those people who say, I could never be around my kid all day long, I'm just going to send him to the school. I'm going to let somebody else deal with that problem. Somebody else is going to have to restrain them and respond to their bad behavior all day long for 8 hours a day so I can get something done. So I can go out and make money. So I can go out and live the American dream. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. They done hired me and pay me money to restrain these kids and to stop these kids from beating up their teachers in school. When I know what Title IX says, I understand all that good stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you don't want to take care of your kids. You don't want to invest in your kids. You don't want to know your kid. You don't want to know that you're probably the reason why your kid is acting up at school. Many parents did not want to know that. You know what's wrong with this kid? Their parents is what's wrong with this kid and the way that they're treated at home. And then they're required to come to a place where they need to spend time, focus, energy, effort, obedience, discipline, and they can't do it because they couldn't do it at home because it's not modeled at home. Oh, you get me going all day long on public schools. Yeah, I used to work there. I don't anymore. I work for Erskin Music. I work with Big Head and I work with Ruby and Scooby. Those are my companions. We travel, we get it done for the Lord. So here's my thought on homeschooling and homeschoolers. Everybody homeschools. Everybody homeschools. Barna report, any report that you can imagine out there, it all says the same thing. The primary influencers of your kids are not the professionals that you send them to, the schools that you send them to, the camps that you take them to, the conferences that they're at, the concerts that they go to, all the individuals they meet, famous people. Those are not the primary influencers of your kids' lives. If you want your kids to develop a biblical worldview, you want your kids to develop into actual decent human beings who are responsible and can use power and authority properly, you educate your kids. Well, some people say, well, I just don't have time to do that. You don't have time to do that? You don't have time to do that. So what you're saying is, I'm not going to take the time to do that, but I'm going to foist them out to people in culture and society and hope the job gets done. You just abdicated your role to disciple and to encourage the growth of your kids. You just pushed no on that. But what you essentially did is you didn't not homeschool your kids. Your kids are learning their primary influence at home. And so if your primary influence is that's somebody else's responsibility, then you know what your kids are going to grow up to do? They're going to say, well, discipline is not my responsibility. And we've grown up with a whole culture of kids who are now parents who are now saying, well, this is not my responsibility. I don't know why they're acting like this. I don't know. I don't know why they can't read the Bible. If they don't want to do it, then they don't have to do it. I didn't have to. Well, why should we force them to do this? Why should we make our home a place? The church does that stuff. Let them go to church and hear all that spiritual mumbo jumbo stuff. We don't need to do that at home. We don't need to actually sit our kids down. I told my son this morning, sit your rear end down. I'm talking. Yes, and I talk to my kids that way at home. Because what they have to say compared to what it is that I have to say when I'm teaching and instructing them biblically and training them in the way that they should grow up, giving them proverbial wisdom, I don't care about the dog at this point. I don't care about what you need more milk. I'm trying to instill something in you. So we have some very real, but that's just the way that we do things here. So you can't give away what you don't have, but you always give away what you do have. If you can't say amen, you got to say ouch. It was supposed to be a sound effect.
I apologize for nothing.
You can't give away what you don't have, but you always give away what you do have. If you don't have anything spiritually to give away to your kids, then what you're going to give them is whatever you have. So if you're into sports and that's all you're about, then that's what you're going to give your kids, and that's what they're going to grow up, and that's going to be their worldview. Everybody homeschools. Let me get this banner up here. Homeschooling. Every parent does this. It's just nonsensical to even debate it. And now that we've had COVID and we've been in a situation where the parents have had to homeschool their kids, I hope and pray that one of the things that happens is instead of the parents being frustrated that they had to spend all this time, extra time with their kids and say, man, we can't do this. You're going to have to get a cure for this disease because I am not staying home with this kid again. Instead of parents saying that, I'm hoping that the parents come out and say, you know what? Why in the, I got to censor myself. Hit the button. Just don't say it in your mouth. Why in the world am I sending my kid for 8, 10, 12 hours a day over to those people over there so they can corrupt my kid's worldview so they're not able to think by the time that they graduate? And I'm not taking anything away from graduations. If you graduated this year, congratulations. It was a tough year. And so go out and do something in the world. You haven't done anything yet, but you did graduate. But why in the world am I sending my kid over to that place for 8 hours a day and they're getting that little return from it? They have no biblical worldview. They cannot stand on their own principles. They have no morals. They have no ethics, and they're influenced by people who are ungodly. Teachers, administrators who can't think and who don't give them absolute truth. Why in the world would I do that? I am not sending my kid back to that place ever again. Hopefully there will be a larger movement of homeschooling parents as a result of COVID who recognize, man, I should have been doing this all the time. God, forgive me for my slack and lazy attitude toward my kids and toward this culture and toward society and toward the kingdom of God. That's where we started today. And toward the kingdom of God. But I am now going to take the responsibilities that God has given me, and I'm going to train and disciple and instruct these kids in the way that they should go, because that's what God requires of me. If they're going to become biblical men and women in this culture, men who will stand up for righteousness, men who will, when they have authority, they're not going to abuse their authority, as we saw this police brutality nonsense, women who are going to be righteous and virtuous in this culture, if they're going to get that, they're going to get that from me and my family and my home, because we can teach that better than anybody in this world can teach. Not a Christian music concert in the world, and I'm a Christian music artist, is going to give you that. Not a camp in the world is going to give you that. But hopefully parents will take up the responsibility of homeschooling. So am I making digs about homeschoolers? Yes, I'm still poking fun at homeschoolers. And I told Kelly this morning, and this will be my final word on the thought. I know we're going long today. The reason why homeschoolers are weird, let me get up in the screen, is because they're supposed to be weird. They're supposed to be weird. I do not want my kids acting like everybody else acts, who has consumed hundreds of hours of death on television, horror on television, desensitizing programming, pornography, all these different things my kids have not been exposed to. I don't want them to go into those environments and then have the same responses that those kids have. They're supposed to be different. That's why we're homeschooling. That's why they're responding the way that they're. That's how sometimes they don't even know what to say. They hear things and they're just like, I don't even know where to go with that. And you know what? I'm okay with that. So for all those homeschoolers out there that maybe tuned me out, tune back on. Because I love and appreciate what it is that you do. Weird kids that we're raising, and I'll just say it like this, different kids that we're raising who respond to the world differently because they haven't been filled up in their minds with all the cesspool of stuff that we produce in this culture and in this country. They haven't been desensitized by all this nonsense They haven't been. Proverbs 13:20 says, he that walks with the wise will be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. They haven't been destroyed by all their little nonsensical idiot fool friends that they roll around with in school. That's why our kids are different. That's why they don't talk the same. They don't walk the same. They don't dress the same. They don't look the same. They don't respond the same. And you know what? I'm okay with weird. I'm okay with weird. I love weird homeschool kids. I embrace weird homeschool kids and their families and their know-it-all parents. I love it. I love being a part of that culture. I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Maybe we can all do this together. Seek first the kingdom of God. I got a song called Black and White that I'm going to play for you guys in just a few moments. But let me check the comments and make sure. After it looks like I started insulting cats, everybody tuned out. After I started insulting homeschoolers and know-it-alls, it looks like people tuned out, so I won't. All right, so if this was not your show today, come back tomorrow. We have a special guest. Bill Zufelt is going to be joining us tomorrow. I think he's in the beach somewhere. He's on vacation. I'm going to have to get that guy to call into this show and come up on the screen. He does a lot of different stuff. He's one of those guys that's a producer slash, I say producer. He works in the managerial side of the music industry. For those of you who are artists that are out there and paying attention to this show, you recognize that not everything that happens in music is just music. There's people who have to manage all this stuff, and there's people who have to organize events. And so Bill Zufeld is going to come and give us the other side of music. So here's the song Black and White. Hope you guys enjoy this. This is my attempt. Instead of just cursing the darkness, why don't you try to write some songs and travel some places and to tell some people some things about how we're all one race. God created us from Adam and Eve. And here we go. So this is the song Black and White.
The most segregated time in our country is Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. Black churches, white churches right next door. They're on the same block, both with hands raised high to Jesus. Still a million miles between us. Black people, white people, remember the God who made you and me equal. And not some people, but all people, remember the God who made you and me equal. We all want to walk with Jesus. We all want to be about His will. How do we break down the unseen walls where bridges need to be built? A song may not change your mind, but Jesus won't let me keep it inside. Black people, white people, remember the God who made you and me equal. And not some people, but all people, remember the God who made you and me equal. Baby, it all begins by not focusing on ourselves, fixing our eyes on Him, living our lives as friends. Black people, white people, remember the God who made you some people, but all people remember the God. Remember the God who made you and me equal. You and me are equal. You and me are equal.
Okay, that's Black and White, a song that I wrote several years ago. I've been playing all around the world. I love the feature that actually mutes my microphone because now I'm able to sing in the background with my own songs. And man, I know all the words to that song. So that's again another episode of the Erskin Music Show.
I apologize for nothing.
If your feelings were hurt today, then come back tomorrow and you can build yourself back up.
Get back to work, you slacker.
So it's time for you guys who have been tuning in. If you're taking time away from your employer to listen to the show, if that's not okay, then you need to get back to work. And let's do everything right. Let's keep it steady in the eyes of the Lord. Thank you guys for tuning in. And this has been a lot of fun today. Hopefully we can archive this somewhere. And if yesterday was one of the worst shows that I've done, I feel like today has been one of the better shows that I've been able to put together, just because I was able to think a little bit clearer today and have a little fun with you guys. It's always interesting when you're dealing with homeschooling and dealing with racism in America. There's a lot of gospel-centered topics. I just hope that if you're a pastor out there, and I may even bring on, because this is a topic that I'll probably deal with next week, it's white pastors' responsibility. I think that among black pastors that I know, most black pastors have been saying these kind of things for a long time. But in the white evangelical church, Donald Trump loving white evangelical church, there have been not a lot of white pastors who talk about these themes. And so I'm wondering, now that I have some of my good friends are white pastors and are talking about these things, if there will be a movement or a trend toward more white pastors talking about some things in the culture that actually are of sensitive nature. Well, I have high hopes. I can pray for that, because most white pastors that I know don't talk about abortion. They don't talk about divorce and remarriage, not from a biblical standpoint. And so that gets really tricky there, to ask them to once again to do something that they don't want to do. Okay, well, that's subject for next week. This has been the Erskin Music Show. We enjoyed it.